So in the previous videos, I have set a foundation, and I'm now going to build on that. I'm going to try and show you what is the most important realization you can come to about duality, and therefore also about non-duality. And I'll start by talking about the fact that for thousands of years, especially in the East, there has been this tradition, spiritual tradition that has said the vast majority of humankind are blinded by an illusion. They call it Maya. But it's possible to awaken from that illusion. And this is, of course, what has been taken by the modern non-dual movement, where some people say that you don't have to follow a long, gradual path, which is what they have said in the East for a very long time, but you can go a more direct way and question the way you look at life, question the illusion, and work through it very quickly and have a very quick, if not instant, awakening. And so we have this tradition, right? So the question is awakening, the illusion. What is the illusion? And as I've now said in the previous videos, the illusion is that we are in a certain state of consciousness where we look at everything through this filter of the dualistic mind that always has the two opposite polarities and always assigns that one of them is real and the other is unreal. One is good, one is evil. There's the value judgment. Okay, but what is that illusion that has been called Maya? Well, part of it is our worldview, the way we look at the world, the way we look at ourselves, the way we look at other people, our interactions in the world. And there's a lot of things in this worldview that we just take for granted. We don't question them. We think, oh, this is just the way it is. And part of this worldview, a very essential feature of this worldview, is this idea that we live in a world of separate objects. So, separate people. The world, there's a physical environment, but we are separated from that environment. Now, the world may have a source, it may be some God, but it's the remote God up there in the sky. So what has been part of humankind's worldview for a very long time is this idea we are separate. And just one example of this is that I can kill your physical body, but I'm not going to be struck by lightning if I do that, so I can seemingly get away with murder. This is the idea that has caused, a lot of human conflict, a lot of warfare, because people think we can harm others without harming ourselves because we're not connected, we're separate. This is also why they want to kill others, because they think these others are separate from us and they are a danger to as I said, our worldviews, like our religion or our political ideology. They don't agree with us, therefore they should be killed for some greater good. So this is the whole idea of separateness. And now it's very important to realize that this is really a veil that's lying over the minds of most people. It's lying over the collective consciousness. But it is just a veil because it is an illusion. I mean, science has even proven now, quantum physics has proven that everything is connected. Science used to think that particles were separate particles and that you could have two particles that were sent in opposite directions. And as soon as they were separated in space, it was considered that they were not connected in any way. They were separate particles. But quantum physics has now proven that two particles can be physically separated by a large distance, yet they're still connected so that a change in one particle instantly leads to a change in the other. It's not that a signal has to be sent from one to the other, because that could only be sent by the speed of light. No, the change is instant from one to the other. And that can only be because they are not separated, they are actually connected. So science has questioned our common worldview of separation. And of course, spiritual teachings have been doing the same thing for a very long time, because most spiritual teachings contain the idea that everything came out of one source, be it Brahman or God or the Creator or the Buddha nature or whatever you want to call it. So we have now from two sides ideas or realities that question this worldview that everything is separate. And as I've said, the primary function of the duality consciousness is to make it seem real that I'm a separate being and I can do whatever I want as a separate being. So it's possible that you can have an experience, and it can often be a dramatic experience for people because of the contrast between the separate worldview and a sense of connectedness. So you can have this experience of being connected, having a greater sense of oneness. It's like you can step outside the veil of illusion and see that it is an illusion that everything is separate because everything really is connected. So you can have that experience. I'm not in any way questioning that many people have had these experiences and they're genuine experiences. However, what I am questioning is that having such an experience, no matter how dramatic it is, means that you're instantly awakened or enlightened and now you're free from duality. Because duality is a very, very subtle thing. And if you don't realize that, and I see people out there who have set themselves up as non-dual teachers who don't realize how subtle duality is. And therefore they don't realize that what they're teaching about non-duality is colored by duality. And that is, of course, kind of tragic, because how can you, like Einstein said, you can't solve a problem with the same state of consciousness that's created the problem, meaning you can't free yourself from the duality consciousness by using the duality consciousness. That, I think, should be obvious. But maybe it isn't, I don't know. So let's look at this, okay? And in order to really understand why duality is so subtle and is so difficult to free ourselves from once we've stepped into it, we need to step back a little bit. And I have hinted at this in my previous videos here in this playlist, but I have really explained it in my video about how the world was created. So what we need to recognize here is that we can't understand duality, and therefore we can't understand non-duality, unless we understand the purpose of life. And this is really a problem in some of these non-dual teachings that are out there, that claim to be non-dual teachings, that talk about no self and returning to infinite awareness or the featureless Brahman. Basically, any teaching that is based on this idea that differentiation is duality, that differentiation is the same as duality. Any teaching like that will almost per definition ignore the purpose of life, because according to them, the purpose of existence is that you awaken from the dream that you exist and now go back into non-existence, non-differentiation. You go back to infinite awareness, you go back to Brahman. And what I have actually said in some of my non-duality videos, that this is a dualistic view. This in itself is a dualistic view. That you can make a differentiation between Brahman, which is non-differentiated, and the world, which is differentiated. And that the world is bad or an illusion or causes suffering or is an enemy of our spiritual growth. And therefore we need to get away from the world and get back to Brahman, which means there's no differentiation, including us as a self can't be real. So you see what I'm saying? It's like one of the central features of duality, and I have said that in one of the previous videos. Duality is the ultimate justification machine, where you can take any viewpoint you can construct with the mind. And then on top of that viewpoint, your mind is projecting, this is real, this is reality. This is not just an idea I have constructed, this is reality. And so what happens is that if you don't realize this, you can have an experience, you momentarily stepped outside the veil, you see that everything is connected, that separation is an illusion. But then you come out of that experience and now you're back into your normal state of mind, and in your subconscious mind, without realizing, you have elements of duality. And now you're using those elements of duality to make sense of the experience that you had of being outside duality. You are interpreting the non-dual experience with the duality consciousness. And that's why you are reasoning everything must have an opposite. What we see in the world is everything seems separate, everything is differentiated, and we see suffering in the world. So suffering must be caused by differentiation. Therefore, the opposite of differentiation is a state where there's no differentiation, Brahman or infinite awareness, whatever you want to call it, pure awareness, and we need to attain that in order to get over suffering. And this is a flaw that you see even in Eastern spirituality going thousands of years back. As I said, people think we have to get away from the world in order to be spiritual. No. Because it's not the world, it's not differentiation that causes us to suffer. I've said there is no differentiation in reality. The world has, there's no duality in reality. The world is differentiated, but it's not differentiation that causes suffering. It's the duality consciousness that causes suffering. In other words, the duality consciousness is not differentiation. The duality consciousness is an overlay that our minds put on differentiation, where we take things that are differentiated and say, this is good, this is bad. And so what some of these non-dual teachers do, when they've had a genuine non-dual experience, they come back into their normal state of mind, and now they're saying, oh, I experienced such oneness, such peace when I was outside my normal state of mind. And this must mean that the differentiation is the cause of my suffering, and if I just overcome the differentiation, I won't be suffering. And therefore they're saying, well, the world is differentiated, there must be something that is opposite that, which is not differentiated, and that's Brahman or infinite awareness. So my goal is, the purpose of my existence is to return to that. But the way they see it, or at least the way many people interpret it, is that the non-differentiated, well, it's non-differentiated. Nothing can exist there that has form, meaning you as an individual self cannot exist in infinite awareness or pure awareness or Brahman. Which again, as I've said before, means that they're saying the purpose of my existence is to attain non-existence, is to no longer exist. And this is not in accordance with reality. This is a recent conclusion. But it's not based on what reality is really like. It's based on how we see reality from the dualistic state of mind. I know this is subtle to get, okay, but let me just try and explain it from a different perspective. Okay, so what have I said about duality? I've said it is a justification machine. This is what we can see in the world. But more than that, it's really just a way to have a specific type of experience. Now there are discussions, and have been discussions among philosophers and even spiritual people for a long time, and it goes back to this, what Shankara said. Only Brahman is real, the world is an illusion. Is the world an illusion? Well, what do you mean with that? What do you mean that the world is an illusion? I have a pen here. Is it an illusion? Is my body an illusion? Are the trees and the fields outside my house, are they illusions? Is my house an illusion? Well, there is something here, right? So what I'm saying is, the world is not an illusion in a sense that there's nothing there. There's nothing that's real. Now you can say the world is temporary. I will agree that there was a point, if we go back in the past, where planet Earth didn't exist, my house didn't exist. It was built in 1950, so I know there was a time where this was just a field. So, yes, the world is temporary. And if by temporary you mean it doesn't really exist, it's not real, okay, then the world is not real. But there is something here, right? We experience the world. So, what if we did something here? This is just a little bit of a mental trick. But what if we said, let's put aside the discussion, is the world real or is it not real? Let's put that aside. Let's do something else instead. And this is in fact what some non-dual teachers will do. They'll say, what is the one thing you can't deny? And that one thing is, you are having an experience. Right now you're experiencing watching this video, but you can go and do something and you're experiencing whatever you're experiencing. So you are having an experience. And you're experiencing there is a world outside of you. But let's not worry about whether that world is real or not. Because there must be something outside of you that's triggering your experience. There is a tree on the field that you can see. What if there at least temporarily is something that's triggering your experience? Oh, it's a tree. So, what is it that matters here? What is it that matters to us? Does it really matter whether the world is there, whether the world is real or not real? Or is the real question to ask ourselves is our experience real or not real? Because we can't deny that we're having an experience. Right? So there was a famous French philosopher called René Descartes, and back in, I think, the 1700s, he went through a period where he said, I'm going to doubt everything that I can possibly doubt. And he doubted that the world isn't real, because there could be an evil demon that was projecting into his mind this image that there's a world outside his mind. So he could doubt the reality of the world. But what he couldn't doubt, when he had doubted everything he could doubt, he couldn't doubt, I'm conscious, I'm aware, which is the same as saying, and how did he know he was conscious? He said, I think, therefore I am. But you could really broaden that and say, I'm having an experience, therefore I exist. So now the question is the experience I'm having real? Is it affected by something that my mind didn't create, or is the experience I'm having entirely created internally in my own mind? And there are non-dual teachers, philosophers, even spiritual teachers from the past, who will say that everything we experience is created in our own minds. Okay, as I said, this is just another version. Is the world real or is it not real? But what I would say is, just think about it this way. If everything we experience is created in our own minds, how come we can have different experiences? Or perhaps we should even say, how come so many people have the same experience? So in other words, you're watching this video. If you take the theory that everything is created in your mind, then I am a creation of your mind. I don't exist. I'm just a figment of your imagination. But wait a minute. I'm sitting here and I'm having an experience that I definitely exist. So, is it so that I'm a figment of your imagination, or are you a figment of my imagination? Did my mind create you, or did your mind create me? And by the very fact that we are different people, we can disagree about things, but we can also, most humankind experience, there is a planet we're living on, and there's a sun up there in the sky. Perhaps we could put it aside and say, well, it doesn't really matter whether our minds have created the experience we're having, because we can certainly see that many people have the same experience, and therefore it is easier, more logical in my view, to assume there's something outside our minds that are triggering our experience. Now, we can still ask the question, is what we are experiencing the way the world really is? Or is our experience colored by our minds? And that's what I've said in the previous videos in this playlist, that the effect of duality, the duality consciousness, is that we are experiencing the world through a perception filter, a coloring. So there is differentiation in the world, but our minds are projecting a dualistic overlay upon that differentiation, calling it good or bad, right or wrong. So, I know this was a kind of a sidestep, but I still think it has a bearing on understanding what duality does. Because what we can now say is, we can even say, it doesn't really matter what is outside of our minds. Because what we can see is that humankind as a whole, most people, are in the state of mind where we experience as a reality that we are separate from other people, we're separate from our physical environment, we're separate from our source. And what I'm saying is, this experience of separation is the essence of the duality consciousness. So, I know it was a long-winded way to get to this point, but let's just take the next step here. And the next step relates to what I said, the purpose of life. And again, I'm saying, just put your attention on your heart here, in the center of your chest, as a heart, your center of your heart. And you can just intuitively sense what happens when I say, the purpose of your existence is to awaken from the dream that you exist and return to non-existent, where you're gone, you're completely gone. The highest spiritual teaching, the highest spiritual attainment that you can reach as an individual being is that you no longer exist as an individual being. How does that resonate with you? How does that vibrate with you? If you feel, oh, that's great, I want to not exist anymore, fine, I can't help you. But if you sense that, it can't be right. It can't be right that I came into existence to return to non-existence. Then we can take the next step, because now we can realize. As I said, the bottom line is we're having an experience. So, what is the purpose of life? What if the purpose of life is to have experiences? What if what we see as the world out there is just an environment that is designed to give us experiences? In other words, the entire purpose of life is that we have experiences. But now you will say, of course, yeah, but is it just to have an experience? Or does it go somewhere? Is there a direction? Does the experiences we are having, does that lead to somewhere? And again, there's no proof of this. So I'm just asking you to again tune into your heart. And what I'm saying is, yes, there is a purpose to every experience we're having. And that is we can expand our sense of self. We can raise our level of awareness, raise our consciousness. I talked in previous videos about how we can say there's a scale of consciousness that we can see in humankind. There are the psychopaths and sociopaths and narcissists that are at the very lowest level of consciousness because they're totally focused on themselves as separate beings, thinking, I can do whatever I want. It doesn't matter if I kill millions of people. I have a right to do this because I'm so great, I'm so special. And then you can see that most people are not at that level, but they are still somewhat selfish and certainly self-focused. And then you can see that looking at history, there's always been some people that have raised themselves above that level, have attained a higher level of awareness that is not all about me. They are not focused on themselves. They are focused on raising the whole, or they are focused on getting out of this world. So if we look at that there is any kind of spiritual tradition going back, we can say that, well, the background for this is that you raise your level of awareness, you overcome the illusion that most people are blinded by. And the illusion is we're separate beings. So spiritual traditions going thousands of years back have been about overcoming the illusion that we're separate beings. And as I said, that illusion is produced by the duality consciousness. Okay, but now you can say, so what could be the purpose of raising our consciousness? What's the point? Well, what many spiritual people talk about is that when you overcome the illusion of separation, or at least when you have an experience, you see beyond it, you see that the world is not made up of separate objects because everything came from the same source. So, as I said, my hand and air seem very different, but they're both made of atoms and subatomic particles and energy waves. So really you can see that when you trace the differentiation back, you can see that the differentiation we see at the surface level comes from a deeper level of reality that is more simple, and you can keep tracing it back until everything is connected and everything came out of the same source. This is, again, the statement, only Brahman is real, the world is an illusion. It actually just means that ultimately there is only one reality. And in that one reality, nothing is separate. Nothing is separated. Everything is an expression of the one reality. And as I've said now several times, this original statement is meant to jolt our minds so we realize that even though the world seems to be separate from Brahman, it is actually an expression of Brahman. And that means you don't have to look beyond the world to see Brahman. You have to look beyond the outer form in the world to see that behind that form is Brahman. Behind that one is the one. Now, here comes a question that has not been asked in the Eastern tradition, at least that I'm aware. And of course I haven't studied all Eastern teachings, so maybe I'm just wrong here. But the question is oneness the same as non-differentiation. In other words, is Brahman completely non-differentiated? Is there absolutely no differentiation in Brahman? This is a very, very important question to consider. And most people probably have never even thought about it, never even heard the question. But if Brahman is completely non-differentiated, if there's absolutely no differentiation in Brahman, how could there be a purpose to our existence? How could there be a purpose to the world? You're really saying if there's no differentiation in Brahman, then there's no awareness in Brahman. There's no consciousness there. Brahman is just the non-differentiated. Brahman is not a being. Therefore, Brahman couldn't have formulated a desire to create a world and have any intention for creating the world, if it's just all non-differentiated. So therefore, what I'm saying is, there has to be something that has self-awareness, that has imagination, and has the will to be able to choose, I will create a world. I am here, I exist, I am self-sufficient, I don't have to create a world. But I want to. I'm going to create a world. And that being has to have an intent, a purpose for creating the world. And what might that be? Well, what I'm saying in my video about how the world was created is that the purpose, I'm not talking about Brahman, I'm talking about the Creator. The purpose for the Creator is to create an environment and send self-aware extensions of itself into that environment. And those extensions, they are an extension of the Creator's own consciousness and being, which means they are all out of the one source. But they start out with a very point-like sense of self, a very localized sense of self, in a particular environment. Like, let's say, we have our universe. Scientists keep pushing the boundaries and seeing how the universe is bigger than they thought it was. So it's enormous, it's huge, right? You look at the universe in your mind's eye and you realize that we are living on a speck of dust in an almost infinite space. So the purpose of creating the world is to create these environments like planets, where a self-aware being can start out having this very localized sense of self, just being aware of itself and its immediate environment, and identifying itself with or as a physical body, for example, on a planet like Earth. And then in that environment, this self-aware extension of the Creator has experiences. Now this extension also has free will and imagination. So, by having these experiences, this being can then grow in self-awareness, expand its sense of self. I am, for example, more than this physical body. I'm not a product of the physical world that are my environment. I am more than the environment because I came from somewhere beyond my environment. This is the potential we have. And as I said in a previous video, when we first came into being on Earth, we had a sense of being connected to something outside our own minds. And that connection is ultimately to our spiritual self, which exists in a higher energetic realm than this world, but even beyond that, to our Creator. And what we have the potential to do is start with the sense of awareness we have here on Earth and expand it, become more and more aware of our connection until we attain the same level of awareness as the Creator. So we are, in a way, creators in the making, and the world is an educational institution designed to produce other creators. Why that is, I go into in how the world was created. But you see, this could be the purpose of life, the purpose of our existence. It's either a cosmic accident, it would seem, because Brahman has no intent for creating the world, it just happened, or there is a purpose. And the purpose then is that the world gives us experiences that give us the opportunity to expand our sense of self. But as I've said, we start out having an intuitive sense that we are connected to something outside our own minds, but we have free will and imagination. So we can imagine what would it be like to be a separate being. And then we can choose to have that experience that we're separate beings. Right? But here comes an important consideration. And this is where we get back to the purpose, what really is the problem with non-duality. Why is it so subtle and how to get out of? What have I said? I've said the same thing that spiritual teachings have been saying for thousands of years. The entire world came from one source. Therefore, everything is connected. I'm hesitant to say everything is one, because many people, especially many Western people, when they hear this, we will, with their linear minds, think that, again, everything being one means there's no differentiation. Everything is the same. But that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that all of the forms we see in the world are connected because they came out of the same source. And they are sort of, they're connected in this web. The Buddha called it the interdependent originations, where the Buddha said there are no separate causes that lead to separate effects. Everything is interdependent. And this is really what science has proven, quantum physics has now proven. And so this is what it really means. In reality, everything is connected. Here we have some beings on a planet called Earth who desire to experience what it's like to be separate beings, who can do what only separate beings can do. And just to put it in an extreme way, if you see yourself as a connected being, you will experience, you're connected to me. You and I are connected. Well, if you see yourself as connected to me, you can't kill me. Because you know that if we are connected, killing me will affect yourself. It will have a negative effect on yourself. But if you see yourself as a separate being and don't see any connection, then you can think, well, I can kill this Kim Michaels guy and the world will be better for it, so let me do that and it won't affect myself. In fact, I'll be better off by doing it. So, you see, there is certain experiences, as I said, the world is an experience machine. There's certain experiences you can have as a connected being. There are also certain experiences you cannot have as a connected being, but you can have them as a separate being. So, because we have free will, we can formulate the desire to experience what it's like to be a separate being. However, here's what I'm leading up to. You cannot have an actual experience that you are a separate being. Why? Because everything is connected. In reality, everything is connected. So, just to give you a silly example again, you cannot have an actual experience through your physical eyes that the sky is green. You can look up at the sky and it's either gray or it's blue. But it's never green. So, the only way you can experience that the sky is green, if that's your desire, is you put on yellow glasses. And then the interaction of the yellow glasses and the blue light coming from the sky will make you experience that the sky is green. But that experience is not real because the sky is still blue. So you're only having the experience in your own mind. And what I'm saying is, you can desire to have the experience of being a separate being, but it can't be based on reality, because in reality everything is connected. So the only way for you to experience being a separate being is to have that experience inside your own mind. You see what I'm saying? You can have the experience that you are a limited sense of self, you have a limited understanding of the world, but you are connected to something outside your own mind. And you are desiring to expand that sense of connection so you become more and more aware of how the world works. How the real world works. That there is a real world that your mind hasn't created. It was created by greater minds than yours. And you are in a process of gradually discovering that world and how it works, what the principles were that it was based on. That's a real experience. But then you can formulate the desire in your mind to have the experience of what it's like to not be connected, to be a separate being. And that experience cannot be a real experience. It can only be an experience produced in your own mind. And what produces the experience that you are a separate being? The duality, consciousness. Duality is what makes it possible for us to experience, I'm a separate being. I can kill somebody else without being killed myself. And I can be better than somebody else. I can be superior to somebody else. Or for that matter, I can be inferior to somebody else. But you see, in connectedness, and this is a really important point, it's again a subtle point about duality. In connectedness, when you see yourself as connected being, ultimately everything came from the same source, right? So you are an expression of the one mind of the Creator. I'm an expression of the one mind. You are unique, you have a unique individuality that you were created with, and I have a unique individuality. But we are both expressions of the one. What sense does it make to say that your uniqueness is better than my uniqueness, or the other way around? So when you are a connected being, there's no comparison here based on this value judgment of better or worse. It's meaningless. But in separation, you have the value judgment of the duality consciousness, therefore you can say, well, I'm clearly better than everybody else. And you see how I said there are these narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths, throughout history and today, who clearly have that desire in their minds to feel they are better, they are more special, they are more important than every other human being on the planet. Therefore, they should be the leader and everybody should obey them blindly. This is a desire that you can formulate. You can say, was Hitler really better than anybody else? Was he smarter than everybody else? Did he know better than everybody else? No. But he had the experience in his mind. And there were many people who supported him who also had that experience that he was better. You can see the same thing with leaders today. There are leaders who clearly think they are superior, they know better, and there are those who believe them who have that experience also. But was it real? Was Hitler really smarter than everybody else? No. So it was just an experience in his mind and in the minds of those who believed it, in what he was saying. It was just an experience. And that experience is possible only in duality, because what duality gives you is, as I said, the two opposite polarities. One is good, one is bad. You can draw a line in between and there are gradations. So somebody out there is ultimately bad and one person here is ultimately good. But in between are gradations, and those who are following the ultimately good leader, they are closer to that side of the equation than those bad people over there who are opposing the leader or following some other leader who's a false leader. So you see what I'm saying? You suddenly get the experience that you can be a separate being who can do whatever you want, or you can still have the sense that you are part of a group, but you're belonging to God's chosen people, or the Aryan race, or those who are smarter than everybody else. And that experience you can't have when you're connected, but you can have it in duality. So now we need to take the next step here. And this is where you really begin to grasp how subtle duality is. And it is this. As I said, you cannot really be separated because the world is one interconnected whole. So you can only have an experience in your mind that you're separated. But if you knew this was just an experience, you wouldn't actually have the fullness of the experience. So let's say you have a desire to experience what it's like to fly an airplane. But you don't have any intention to going through years of training to become a pilot. So you pay money to go to a flight simulator. You go inside this machine, you sit down, it looks like an airplane cockpit, and there's a screen that's like the windows you're looking out of, and you can even do this on your computer, but it gives you a more full experience to go to a flight simulator. And now you're having the experience, I'm flying an airplane. You're not really, but you're having the experience. But of course you know, oh, yeah, I used to be outside the simulator, and now I went into this simulator. I didn't become a pilot by going in here, but I'm just having an experience. It's the same thing as a movie. You can watch a movie, and while you're watching a movie, you're completely engrossed in the movie. You forget that there was a world outside. But once the lights are turned on in the movie theater, you realize, oh yeah, let's get back to the real world. So what I'm saying is, if you knew that you had gone into separation in order to have an experience, and that what you are having is just an experience, it wouldn't be the fullness of your experience. In order to really have the fullness of the experience that you are a separate being, it must seem completely real to you that you're a separate being. In other words, it's not an experience you are having, it's reality. This is how the world is. Now again, you can say, if you take the flight simulator, right? So here you have a device. It's created to give a certain experience. It's not a real airplane. But if you are aware that it's not a real airplane, you're not having the fullness of the experience that you're flying a real airplane. So therefore, you must forget that you went into the flight simulator. So what duality does is, it creates a certain environment. That's what I mean. The flight simulator is created to give you an experience. Right? So the duality consciousness creates not a certain environment, but in your mind, it creates a certain filter where you believe that the world is made of separate objects. But on top of that, the duality consciousness projects this sense of reality. This is not something that was created by the duality consciousness. This is how the world is. The world is actually the way I experience it. My experience is completely real. And that's why I said, in our worldview, there are things we take for granted. We never question them. And that's what can happen to people when they have a dramatic experience, is that suddenly you question elements of your world experience. But you see, here comes the essential distinction. And this is, in a sense, what I've been leading up to with all of my talk here about duality. say you are having an experience that you are a separate being. You've had that this lifetime. You may have had it many lifetimes on earth. So there's a part of your mind, this is what we normally call the ego, that is absolutely convinced that you are a separate being. The world is separate, made up of separate objects. It's absolutely convinced that this is true. Now you have an experience where you're stepping outside of that Maya, that illusion, that perception filter. And you are experiencing the real world out there. It is really connected. Everything is really connected. Now you come out of that non-dual experience, you're back into your normal state of mind, and you are questioning your perception that the world is separate. But you are not making a crucial distinction. You're not asking yourself, why did it seem so real that the world is separate when in reality it's connected? Why was I so absolutely convinced that the world was separate, that I was separate, when in reality I have now experienced that everything is connected? And what you are not realizing is that the sense of reality that you had about separation was completely and utterly produced inside your own mind. And because of that, you are not acknowledging that your mind has the ability to project a sense of reality on something that's a complete illusion. And you are not acknowledging that your worldview based on separation is very complex, multifaceted. It has many elements. I have in many of my videos, I've talked about how the world is, the ego is not this amorphous big entity. The ego is made up of a number of what I call subconscious selves that are individual beings that are based on a certain illusion. So we can have a myriad of these illusions. And they are all part of what makes it seem real that we are separate. And if you don't realize that, what can happen, and this is what I see happening to some of these people, even some of these non-dual teachers, is you have a genuine experience of stepping outside of the illusion of separation. You're experiencing that all life is connected. But now you come back into your normal state of mind from this, and you are thinking, oh, I don't need to look at my own state of mind, my own state of consciousness, in order to be free from duality. I just need to, as I said, look out the window in the prison, because now I've seen there's something outside the prison. So I just need to look at it. I don't need to look at all the individual chains that are keeping me bound inside the prison. I can be free of them by just focusing on this non-dual reality that I've glimpsed. So what you are not realizing is that even though you had a genuine experience of the reality outside separation, you are now back, and the elements of duality that you still have left in your subconscious mind, they will color how you interpret the non-dual experience. And that means you are now beginning to use the duality consciousness to project upon the non-dual experience. Which means what? It means, first of all, you interpret the experience a certain way based on duality, where everything must have an opposite. But you're also projecting, no, this is not an interpretation, this is reality. This is how the world really is. So you're not realizing that before you had that experience, you had an absolute sense of reality about how you saw the world before you had the experience. And now you've had one experience, and it shifted your worldview a little bit. And now you have the same sense of reality about your new worldview. And you're not open to the idea that perhaps there is much more to see. Perhaps there are many more dualistic illusions to overcome before you're completely free of duality. You think, oh, I'm free. I'm awakened. I had an awakening experience. And now I'm interpreting this based on my own mind, based on this teaching I found, reading this book and studying these teachings and listening to this teacher, and that's all I need to do, and I'll be free. You see what I'm trying to say here? You grow up, you have a normal sense of experience that most people have. We live in a world of separate objects. Now you have an experience of going outside that illusion, beyond the veil. You're seeing that the world really is connected. Now you come back from that experience, and it has shaken your worldview. It has shifted your worldview. But not completely. You're not completely free from duality. So you're now using the remnants of the dualistic illusions you have to project upon the non-dual experience. And you are projecting, your mind is projecting, that the new view you have, the new worldview you have, the non-dual worldview you have, is absolutely real. What I saw before, that was not real, but what I see now, that is real. So, what I'm trying to say is that duality consciousness has two effects. First, it projects a certain view of the world, a certain set of beliefs. And then it projects reality on top of that. And what has happened to many people is that the specifics of their worldview, they have experienced the alternative, like the specifics of I'm a separate being, you haven't experienced that, that's not true. You are really connected. But people are not questioning the sense of reality. They uncritically transfer the sense of reality to a new worldview. They're thinking, oh, I had this traumatic experience, now I'm fully awakened. And this is real. They're not questioning, yeah, but is it really real? Could there be cleanup work to do where I still have some dualistic illusions left that I need to come to see consciously and consciously dismiss so that I can unlock the chains that are still binding me, I can retrace my steps in the maze and get completely out of the duality consciousness. So you see, in a sense, I'm not questioning that many people have had genuine non-dual experiences. But I am questioning that they transfer the sense of reality they had as separate beings to their non-dual experience and how they interpret it and what they do with it. Because it leads to some pretty bizarre things, some pretty bizarre ideas that are out there. Like there are some of these what are called the radical non-dualists who will say, they're talking, and they will say, there's no one here talking, talking is just happening. You see what I've been saying here? The whole purpose of existence is we have a sense of self, we can expand that sense of self. There are also those who will say, oh, I have no self, I've attained no self. But who is the I that says I have no self? Then there are those who have convinced themselves, I'm pure awareness. I am pure awareness. What's the I that's pure awareness? And what I'm saying is, you're always having an experience. And let's just take another step here and say, what is the world? Planet Earth. What is planet Earth? It can be compared to what we have now created, which is called a reality simulator. The world, the earth, is really a device for giving us certain experiences and making us feel that those experiences are real. We are experiencing a real world. There is a real world here. There is a planet. Now, I'm not saying there isn't something real, because there is a reality simulator, and someone constructed that simulator for a specific purpose. All I'm saying is that the whole purpose is to have experiences. And any experience you can imagine, you can have in the reality simulator of Earth, at least for a time. So if you want to have the experience, I have no self, yeah, you can have that experience. And you can feel it's absolutely real. I'm pure awareness, you can have that experience. I'm not here, talking is just happening. You can have that experience, but that experience exists only in your mind. It's not a real experience. And this is the distinction that I see that even some non-dual teachers haven't made. Because some of these teachers, they will say, or they will claim at least, that the non-dual awareness, the non-dual teaching is the highest spiritual teaching. It's the highest path. It's the direct path to awakening, instead of this long, gradual path. You can just go directly to question who you are, who am I, and that will awaken you more quickly. But that claim is just an experience produced in their own minds. It's not a real experience. And that's really the conclusion you come to when you begin to understand duality. Now, if you don't look at duality, you'll never reach this conclusion. But the conclusion is that your mind can produce any experience and project a sense of reality upon the experience. And what did I say? The purpose of life is that we have experiences. And I said in a previous video, we can go into this maze of the duality consciousness, the separation, and we can have experience. Each time we take a turn, we're having a different experience. Then we take another turn, we have a different experience. And we have the free will to go as far as we want to go in that maze, deeper and deeper into the maze. There really is no maze. We're creating the maze for every decision we make. But the real purpose is that when we go out of the maze, by consciously seeing each illusion we took on, that's when we expand our sense of self. And the expansion of self is the real purpose, not the negation of self. But in order to really grasp this, I know I'm piling a lot on in this particular talk, but we have to realize here that what makes it possible for us to have the experience, I'm a separate being, and what makes it possible for me to feel that that experience is absolutely real, so that I don't even question its reality? Well, it is that, as I said, we start out with a certain sense of self, point-like, localized. And then we can see ourselves when we start as connected beings. We can expand our sense of connection. But what happens when we expand our sense of self? Well, we have a different sense of self now, right? A more expanded sense of self. You can say, let's say, when you're starting out in this open space, but it's completely dark. And you have a little flashlight. That's your self-awareness. And the flashlight lights up a little circle around you. right? That's what you're aware of in your environment. But then now you expand the flashlight and the circle becomes bigger, and now you're aware of something you weren't aware of before. That means you have a wider sense of self, a broader sense of self, a more expanded sense of self. You're aware of more than you were before. And what actually happens is, let's say you start out, you have a certain sense of self. Now you have experiences in your environment. You expand your sense of self. You expand your sense of connection to something outside your own mind. What actually happens is your old self dies, and you're reborn into a higher sense of self. Jesus actually talked about this 2,000 years ago, that you are reborn. You have to die in order to follow Christ. You have to die because you have to let your old sense of self die in order to attain a higher sense of self. But what happens when you go into separation? When you take the step, you no longer see yourself as a connected being, you go into separation. Well, your sense of self, your self that experiences itself as a connected being dies. And you are reborn into a new sense of self that experiences itself as a separate being. That's why separation can seem real. You see what I'm trying to say here? If you knew consciously that you have gone into separation, and you've just gone in there, it's just like you went into that flight simulator. It wouldn't be the fullness of the experience. So if your connected self had some awareness that you had just gone into separation, it wouldn't seem real to you. That's why your connected self dies, and you are reborn as a separate self. That's why duality seems like reality. It seems so real that you are a separate being. But how is this possible? And more importantly, how is it possible if you go into duality and your sense of connectedness dies and you're reborn as a separate being? How is it possible to get out of duality? Well, that's what I'll talk about in the next video.